School report cards, summary reports, and are we having all?
We're going to have all the principals come up, and I have included in a report that kind of summarizes the findings from each of the report cards, and so the principals will share with you a little bit of as they delved into the report cards and looked at that data, what they saw as strengths or weaknesses, gaps, things that they need to be working on, and then what their building improvement plans are for this year, so you're aware of that. So why don't we go, how about from the oldest administrator to the youngest administrator?
Now I have to figure out who it is.
They can figure that out. They can figure that out. Give them a little exercise.
Probably one oldest because I might not be alive by the time the youngest one got done.
And Mrs. Zardi, we get these report cards once a year. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So the next report card we will get will be next
September.
September.
Right. So we have this school year to be working on the results and trying to improve.
Okay.
So go ahead, Mr. Meek.
Age before beauty. Well, as you know, I'm in charge of Warrens and Wyville Elementary Schools. And Warrens, we looked at the data dig, we looked at the report card, and we came up with our school improvement plan, but we wanted to actually wait until we had our first round of testing, which we just completed, so the staff has developed their improvement plan. However, in looking at our report card from Warrens, the number of students, some of the highlights, scoring proficient on the test rose from a 35.8% to 44.2%. Unfortunately, we only had one student who scored advanced on the math test. We did have one student up the Warrens who was not figured in. This was a miscommunications. They were in a treatment facility. We didn't get them the test in time, therefore Warrens took a 0 on that test, so that kept our score down somewhat. Reading overall, we had an increase on that test as well. Our students with disabilities, they showed very little change. It went down about a point, I think it looks like on here. So we're working with those kids to get their scores advanced. What we are trying to do is the teachers are stressing the accelerated reader. They feel that that's a great program. It allows students to progress in their reading abilities. It allows children to choose their own library books that interest them, and give them guidance and selection of their current and correct reading levels. They're encouraging daily reading and taking the AR quizzes regularly. The conferences I sat in, each teacher encouraged parents to get on RAS Kids at Home and work with their kids on those, and the parents were excited about the RAS Kids program they could take home. We have kicked off our family literacy program up the Warrens. We're reading the book Harris and Me, and preliminary reports from the kids I've talked with, they really think it's a good book. It's by Gary Paulson. It's more of a 5th, 6th grade level book. Talks about the adventures of Gary Paulson. One summer he spends on a farm up in Minnesota with his distant relatives. Deb Pierce has worked very hard in coming up with some great activities for the kids that we've included with that book for the parents. As I said, we're basing our improvement plan based on our Ames Web scores. Katie Gerke, our counselor up there, she's starting a girls' book club, and I'm starting a boys' book club, so that we get grades 3 through 5 together as boys. We're leaning towards reading the Hardy Boy mysteries for the boys and Nancy Drew for the girls. The PTO at Warrens, along with the Wyville PTO, is sponsoring Bob Can. That'll be December 6th. He has a Read It's Magic program that he'll be coming to both schools. The program provides students with information, sparks their imaginations, and gives them a nature or a love for reading and language. I've had the fortunate opportunity to see Bob twice. He's outstanding. So he's coming in the morning to Wyville and the afternoon to Warrens on December 6th. Some of the teachers are requiring students to keep a reading log. They record their reading pages in a journal, and then they have to reflect on those. I'm going to skip all. I've sat down with all of the 5th graders, and I have the 4th graders, 3rd graders scheduled to discuss with them the importance individually of the Wisconsin Knowledge and Concepts exam, and showed them their score from last year, and hopefully have convinced them not to go any lower. But we're working on trying to get the kids that are very close to moving up to the next level. Wyville, we met expectations. However, the staff knows that we didn't make it by much. I think we have like 0.6 of a point to spare. The good news out of Wyville is all the 4th grade students scored basic or proficient. So we did get points towards the report card from all the 4th grade students there. We did see a decrease in our overall reading scores, but we knew going in that our 3rd grade class last year, 50% of the kids read below grade level. And we knew that was going to be tough last year. We know it's going to be tough this year because they're 4th graders now and they're taking a greater portion of the test, so they're working with the 4th graders up there. So what are we doing? Title I and PTO, they're working together and they're distributing books 4 times a year to the kids. The first one we did was at conferences. The next one is October 31st. Again, we have our family literacy program. We're going to kick that off next month at Wyville. The staff there is doing a little differently than Warren's. They have a lunch bunch reading group where the title teacher is taking kindergarten to 2nd grade. And again, the counselor and myself are taking the boys and girls for reading club. Title at the 2 schools, Joan and Elaine are planning a co-parent reading night in December or January to get the parents more involved. Again, I'm sitting down with the 3rd through 5th graders to talk about the knowledge and concepts exam. Bob Can's coming. I guess that's about it. We realize the importance of reading. We're trying to get parents to realize our family literacy program. The whole concept behind that is hopefully to get parents reading to kids, but more importantly, get parents to spend some quality time with their children. So that's what we're trying to do. So we'll find out in May whether or not it worked, I guess.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Meeks.
Do I need to introduce myself or anything?
Well, you certainly
All right. I'm Mr. Whitford from Miller Elementary School, Camp Douglas, and Oakdale. At Miller, our major areas of concern were attempting to close the gaps for students in our special education programs and our economically disadvantaged students. It's continued focus probably for many schools across the state. Our special education population is scoring in the minimal category, and an increase in percentage from 55.6 to 69.2, so that became an area of concern for us immediately. And one of the reasons our scores have continued to drop from previous years is that we lost a very high-achieving 5th grade class, and we have a group of 4th grade students that continues to struggle in some skill areas. So that's been a major focus area for us, is figuring out exactly where they need supports and using that intervention time to address those issues. We have many bright spots, though. One of the bright spots for me was that Patty's done an excellent job of setting up the staff with a plan of how to address these issues and how to move forward using their data that we have. We've identified students that are falling behind in proficiency and developed plans for moving them forward with our intervention supports. We still continue to have a focus on data analysis and whatever data we bring in, making sure that we're using that to address students' needs. This is our first year with our math series that's aligned to the Common Core state standards. So while that's a bit of a challenge adjusting to a new program, we believe it's a really strong program, and we think that its alignment to the core will only help us succeed. Teachers are working diligently to align their lessons to curriculum core, to the Common Core using our curriculum companion tool, and they're putting a lot of work into that. And as Marlon said, our literacy committee continues to focus on parent literacy too, and getting literacy to be an important issue in the home as well. We've done this through several things. One of the things that we've really tried to do is create this free library for students in our school too, so students can come in and take books at any time without even having to worry about the library or to go to the public library. So we're just going to continue to try to support that project there. We also continue to score well in areas of attendance and students liking their experience at our school. So that continues to be a bright spot for us. As long as they're enjoying it, hopefully they'll keep coming and we have a better chance of moving them forward. Out at Camp Douglas, one of our focus areas will be addressing our math growth, as this score was down from the previous year and is still a little bit below the state average. We address this by ensuring that there's 60 minutes per day now dedicated to math instruction, and we also have addressed it during our math intervention period as well, that ice time that we have. We're pleased that our overall report card score went up, but we're still striving to be above the state average in both reading and math achievement, so that's something we'll continue to push there, and it's a concern spot for us right now. As far as bright spots out there, at Camp Douglas, we're still working on closing the gaps, or our closing the gap scores were up from last year, and they're above the state averages, so this trend looks to continue as we have some real strong classes at the lower levels moving their way up, so we believe our scores should continue to rise. While our student achievement score was not up to the state average yet, it was an increase from the previous year, and we're hoping that our focus on that data analysis piece and our collaborative planning work that we're doing together will help us continue to move students along that spectrum there. We have received a donation from the Smart Sands Company to help us expand on our summer reading program, where we initially gave students 2 books over the summer. We're now hoping to be able to give them 5 through this program, and we think that will really offer the students, not to mention they get a little choice in what they get to read over the summer, but we're really hoping that will help increase the literacy piece again and engage students in reading over the summer, and hopefully decrease that summer drawback that you tend to see sometimes. So that's some of our plans out there.
Okay. Thank you.
In case you don't know me, Paul Skafronic, Director of Pupil Services, Robert Cooper Learning Center Principal. Basic alternative schools, what we're looking at is the DPI has basically discovered that they're not going to rate Cooper because we are alternative school. They're actually looking at a different format of trying to rate alternative schools. So Cooper got an NA rating, but to dig deep into that, and again, there's a when Cindy pulls it up, there's a typo. I've got the wrong school year on there. Our graduation rate for last school year was 79.3, just a little shy of 80%, which already still, as comparison, beat the state average of 72, a round up to make the state look a little bit better. Our 6-year cohort was 94. Our anticipated rate for this, actually, this this coming school year, we're trying to get to be as high or higher. One of the things that we've shared at previous board meetings is that the function of the high school program, specifically out at Cooper, is to increase the attendance and graduation rate of the district and as a high school as an all. They'll just go back to what if those students didn't graduate. The graduation rate at the high school, per our last meeting we talked about this, would be in the lower 70s. Not acceptable. One of the things that we are excited about is last school year we finally had an ACT participation rate. Our students are now jumping into the 4-year schools, being accepted into the UW system, Milwaukee, Green Bay, Stevens Point, Eau Claire, things like that. So we're pretty excited about that. We'd like to increase that opportunity for students. So right now the cell size is too small, so I can't give you the average, but it's in the upper 20s. We just need to, but again, that's only less than a half dozen students, so we need to get more students, get a better handle on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Michelle Clark, LaGrange Elementary. When we looked at our data for the data dig, items that we considered that contributed to our exceeds expectations for last school year were our closing the gap scores jumped 41 points, which really shows how hard our teachers are working with our students with disabilities that are taking the regular WKCE test. And also we had improvements in our math achievement and growth. We are still behind the state, though, in student achievement and growth in both reading and math. So to improve on those scores, we're continuing to utilize our ICE intervention time for students that are struggling, and those students are selected based on their benchmark scores for this last fall. We took a look at all of our current 4th and 5th grade students, saw where they scored last year, selected students that just need a little extra push, maybe just a little extra encouragement to go back through and look through their test one more time to make sure they have everything answered, to reread any problems that they may have, because we had so many students that were so close to the next proficiency level by just 1 or 2 points. So our theme this year for the WKC is 212 degrees. So this week I'm going into the 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, and letting them know just that little bit really does make a world of difference. And we'll have announcements every day that go with those to help them during our WKC testing. We also we're spreading out our WKC testing this year. We're doing one test a day rather than 2 or 3 tests, which it's always been done that way. I can't tell you the reason why. It just has been, and that's how we had continued to do it for the last few years when I was there. We're trying to utilize best practice in our Tier 1 instruction for all of our classrooms every day, all the time. And we have a new reading incentive program this year called the Million Minute Mania, where we're challenging all of our students to read 1 million minutes outside of the school day. And just during our first month of September, we've had about twice as many reading calendars back than we normally have. So we know that if they read, that's the best thing that they can do, or have someone read to them. And then we will also continue our monthly family nights to include a literacy component. Thank you.
Thank you.
Steve Buss from middle school. You have our information in front of you. I'll hit some of the highlights. From a math perspective, actually I'll go from a reading perspective first. We've continued over the last 3 or 4 years to kind of dance around the state average, always been just above the state average, and we continued that route from our reading scores this year. We had an overall increase of 1% for reading, so still room to go ahead and celebrate as we continue to move forward for reading. Math is where our focus comes down to, and both from our positives and from our concerns. From a math, as you can see from the information in front of you, we increased in every single of the 4 subcomponents, also leading to an overall increased score for our school report card. And math was one area where we saw all those increases take place. Now the increases maybe weren't 10 or 15 points, but it was an increase of 2.2 points for our overall school report card, and in every single of the 4 subcomponents was reasons for us to celebrate. Everything from the simple things, more so of the attendance, the closing of the gap. So every single area we saw an increase, which is something where from a middle school itself, students and staff, a great opportunity to start off our school year, as Mrs. already had talked about at the beginning of the school year, professional development opportunities when we met with our staff. That's the very first thing we talked about, is even though the gains were small, but to see a gain in every single area was something to celebrate as we continue to move forward. Looking at the other perspective, we do still focus on math as our school goal. We have some other smaller areas that we're focusing on, but math, with only 31.9% of our students proficient or advanced in math, we know we have some significant work to do. Our math teachers are very, very dedicated with the implementation of Common Core standards to make that Tier 1 instruction the most important piece that we have. Definitely a significant learning curves for them, as I know our parents are seeing as well, when some of those new assignments that are coming home and new projects that are coming home through math is something very, very new for everyone, but definitely going and helping move us in that right direction. The other piece Mrs. Clark had mentioned, some of those students that were very close to the next proficiency level. Our building leadership team looked at what we have referred to as the 10 above and 10 below. Those students that were 10 students above that proficiency line that are just barely above the line, and also 10 that are just below that. What else can we do to make sure we don't lose those specific students to pull them all above that next line that's going to be there? We do have what we call the 5 minutes of daily math in our team-directed study time, which is our study hall time. It usually extends to more than 5 minutes, but it's beyond the actual math class, where our teachers and all of our teachers across the board are going ahead and giving an additional piece of math instruction, something small, activity-based that's going to go ahead and give our students more exposure to math that we know that our students need. Without a doubt, our special education students did a fantastic job with the over 7-point increase in closing the gaps. Those are things that we want to continue to sustain. But one of the biggest pieces that we want to do this year is to explore ways, whether it's through creative scheduling or other modes, to go ahead and give more time specifically to math and literacy, but to math. I think if you talk with any of our math teachers in general, even our students, they would relish in more time to go ahead and not only to spend time with that actual math teacher to go ahead and get the instruction, but more time with people at school so they don't leave home before they have the information. Thank you.
Thank you.
From high school, before you switch that, Mrs. Sardi, I just want to point out a couple of things that the high school report doesn't include anything on student growth, and we don't have the same on closing gaps because the high school is just one grade. We don't get the benefit of seeing a cohort through. So there's less on our report because there's less in our report. All right. Said that, we were pleased to see a slight uptick in our overall score up to 68.9. It still has us in the meets expectations. Obviously, where we'd like to be is up higher and the exceeds expectations. We had an enormous group from the high school. Herr Bartz and Ms. Hinkle are here. They're two of our department leaders, and they were on our data-dig team along with approximately 15 other people from the high school. So a real broad group that represents every facet, and the group was very clear that we need to hone like a laser on where our greatest need is, and that is math. In math, we have 27.8% of our students are testing at proficient or advanced, which means the converse, 72.2%, if I'm doing my quick math correctly, are not proficient. And then I guess the bigger gap where it becomes evident is when you compare where we're at in our math achievement to the state average, and we're currently 20.4 points below the state average in math achievement. And that's been consistent over time. As we look back at where our 10th grade math scores have been, that's where they have been right in that range. And what we have said as a high school faculty is we're going to go all in and put whatever resources we have to bear to try and combat this problem. And we know that the problems that exist in education are not because we don't have wonderful caring staff or wonderfully smart students. We know, as Mrs. Zardi reminds us, that parents send us the best kids that they've got every single day, and we thank them for that. So the real issue that we can look at is systemic. How is our system set up? How is our time allocated? How is the system structured? The results that we're getting are a result of the system that we have. And so the biggest piece that you've seen us move to at the high school is what we've implemented this year with individualized math. You'll get a longer report on that in just a little bit. And additionally, last year we had a school goal that involved every single academic department in the building, from tech ed to agri-science to the languages, finding a way to integrate math into what they're doing in sometimes big ways and sometimes smaller ways. Herr Bartz would tell you that teaching algebra in German is kind of a feat, you know. However, we found some great ways, some great connections with measurement, for example, which has been a constant struggle with our students, to integrate measurement not only in science, where it makes perfect sense, but also in the technology and engineering areas where there's a nice fit as well, and kids can see the hands-on application. So we started that last year. That's continuing this year as part of our school goal and action plan, and we fully expect to see numbers headed in the positive direction in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know if I like this oldest to youngest decision making. Nikki Pope from Lemonwire. As many of you know, our school met few expectations this year, which was pretty disappointing for all of us, but I have a very dedicated staff that's eager to make improvements. So some of the areas that stood out to us when we went through our data dig were the area of closing the gap, and our boy numbers were a little bit significant. I guess they stood out with only 2 boys in 3rd going to 4th grade were proficient, and only 6 of our boys from 4th to 5th grade were proficient. And with 60% of our population being male, that was an area that we definitely wanted to focus in on. Some other areas we had, like many of the other principals have stated, a large proportion of our population were in that basic group, right there between basic and proficient. We had 48% in basic. So we really focused in on what we could do to help those students, again, push them to that next level and bump them up to proficient. Attendance was another area of concern for us. We can't help them if they're not there. So that was something that we've definitely been dedicated to improve. So some of the things that we've done, parental involvement. We've started the Watchdogs program in our building, which is a system that dads or grandpas or uncles, any male figure, are able to come in and volunteer some time to set a good male role model, read to students, have students read to them, help on the playground, certainly show our male population that it's okay to read. The other part is building our PTO. Last year we had 3 members on our PTO, and in September's meeting we had 26 people show up, so I was pretty excited about that. Tonight we only had about 13, but it's still better than 3. Books in the hands of students, so we've also started a book exchange where students are able to bring in books, exchange them out for new ones. We keep this set in our hallway, so at any time students can come by and grab a new book or drop one off. That's worked really well. We've also created a literacy lab. So our old office, there was an area where we used to keep our medication, and that is now used for resources for teachers. So if one teacher were to order a book set of books on tape for students, they're able to keep that in that literacy lab, and so students or teachers are able to go in and check it out for their students and not necessarily have to purchase more. So it was an opportunity to share resources within the building. Let's see, communicating our results with students. So we've also been focused on goals, setting goals for our students, letting them know where they're at and how much more they need to improve their skills. We also have the comprehension toolkit that was purchased, and that was really focused in on that 25th to 50th percentile. So those basic kiddos, so during that ICE time, what we can do to help bump their scores up. That's been widely received with the staff. They've really enjoyed that. It's bringing in that nonfiction text, and they've really taken that. We are also doing a book study called What Really Matters When Readers Struggle. We are just on our 5th chapter right now, so it's got a lot of good feedback for staff. They've been able to ask a lot of questions, be able to take some of the suggestions and apply it to their classrooms, so that has went well. Our tree of knowledge, if you walk into our building, right on the left-hand side is a beautiful tree that was created, and there's tons of leaves up there right now. I think actually I might have here's a picture, Mrs. Murray. So if students are reading a book at home, they get to come in and bring in their slip and fill out a leaf, and they get their name on there, and they're combined with grade levels, so it's a challenge, so they get to put their leaf on the board. Let's see, where am I at? Extra use of our title opportunity. We had a change for a .5 title position at Lemon-Wire, and we've kind of changed how we're using that as opposed to pulling out for small group for LLI. We're doing something a little different where we're having that teacher go into the classroom providing Tier 1 support. So they're coaching with first and second grade. They're providing resources, gathering materials, being kind of an observer to say, hey, why don't you try this with this small group. They're also working with our support staff, because often our support staff are pulling those students that are struggling with reading, giving them tips and what to say instead of sound it out, giving them other feedback of how they could help those students. That person has also started a weekly newsletter that's called the Literacy Loop. It just gives kind of tidbits of what you can do or suggestions to help within the classroom. And attendance. I had extra, so I brought some. As I mentioned, we struggled with attendance, so we had these created this year to help our parents. And Mrs. Zardy, there's enough. You can take one if you want. To help with attendance. So all of our days off, any important days, parent-teacher conversations, and meetings, we have our first quarters listed and all of our contact information on top. And then just making sure we're making those connections with parents as far as attendance before it gets to the point where we're concerned about truancy, what we can do to help them get their kiddos there. So our main focus is we're really focusing in on our male population again, what we can do, doing some surveys of what kind of books they're interested in. Nonfiction text seems to be the popular. So snakes and reptiles and trucks, we're trying to get more of those types of books into their hands and encouraging them to keep reading. All right.
Thank you.
You bet.
I vividly remember the data dig when Lemon-Wire had that moment of just, oh my goodness, look at our male performance compared to our female. And that came from really digging into that data. And so it's, it's a testament to them to be looking at strategies that will specifically focus on that population. I think as you listened to all the principals, you heard them talking like instructional leaders. They're concerned about student achievement, and that's a huge shift from even 10 years ago, when really the focus seemed to be always on managing the building, making sure everything was fine. And they're still doing that. They're still managing their buildings, but their focus truly is on the role that they place in helping their staff to improve student achievement. And they get their hands dirty in terms of looking at the data and brainstorming with the staff. And I can tell you, when I go into every building, it never fails that a staff member will approach me and say, wow, Nikki's doing such a great job. Michelle's doing wonderful. David's doing a great job. Steve, Marlon, every single one of them, I hear comments about their involvement with the students, their involvement and engagement with what's happening with student achievement. So they've been working hard, and I want to thank them for all their work as well.
Oh, I had a couple of questions, but you can come up anyway. These are based on the WKCE scores. I thought we were transitioning to smarter balance tests.
We are. Okay. We are transitioning to that, and I believe those go into play next year. So, and the test will actually be in the spring, not the fall. So I believe this is our last year of the WKCE, but the Smarter Balanced will only be in reading and math. So we'll still have components of the WKCE in social studies and science in those areas.
But reading and math sort of being our focus, those will go to the Smarter Balanced test. They're going to be in the spring. Any sort of discussion about what we expect will happen with those changes? Is it just nobody knows, or?
I think we can anticipate a drop in our scores. I took a sample 5th grade Smarter Balanced math assessment the other day, and it was a challenge. I had to really think, and I wished I had a calculator to help me with a few of the computations. And I know our principals have started looking at those assessments too. Our plan is, they do have samples out there. We want to start exposing our students to those sample tests so that they get a sense, but they certainly are higher level thinking questions, and they require multi-step processes to reach a solution. So it's going to take some time for us to transition. But again, with implementing the Common Core State Standards, which is increasing the rigor of what we're teaching in the classroom, by focusing on gradual release of responsibility, helping students to understand that they need to be practicing and doing a lot of these things on their own, by integrating higher level thinking skills, all of those will eventually help us see our students' achievement level rise. It's a common thread, more rigor. In the short term, it is a little painful. In the long term, it'll be very good. Very good. Okay.
And the Smarter Balance is tied to the Common Core much more closely then?
Yes.
And it's currently used in some states.
That is correct. Yeah.
So we're moving, Wisconsin's going that direction.
Yes.
That's why we're moving there.
Yes.
Another question I had, I know with this data, you can look very individually at different schools, even down to the classroom. And for example, in elementary, then I'd almost think that if you went into any elementary, we have the same schedules roughly for classes from elementary to elementary, but with different needs for different classrooms as exposed by this evidence, do they have quite a bit of flexibility to then adjust classroom schedules to focus more on whatever the data says is a deficiency?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think that's the good thing about the way that DPI is now presenting information to us. It's called WISE Dash, which has multiple years of student achievement. So as you said, you can drill down to an individual student, see where they were. Let's take a current 6th grader. You should be able to see their 3rd grade test scores, 4th grade. So you can look specifically at what are the things that that particular child needs. And so you are seeing much more individualized approach to helping each child based on the areas that they have weaknesses in.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you to all the administrators for spending the time dealing with all that information and giving us an honest look at strengths and weaknesses and for plans for dealing with those. So thank you very much.